Thank you for joining me for today's 15 Minutes to BIM webinar. My name is Karen Pierce, and I'm a BIM specialist at Unify Labs. Unify Labs is the leading provider of content management solutions, storing any and all content on the cloud. I invite any and all questions throughout this presentation, as I've been in the industry for 10 years. I've been an MEP designer, an architectural BIM manager, and now I've been doing software trainings and implementations for our customers. I love working with each of our customers and journeying with them, training them, and assisting them with the implementation of Unify, because each organization, while of course unique, faces many of the same challenges. This particular series is where we promise to take no more than 15 minutes of your time to introduce concepts, perhaps increase existing ones, or if we're lucky, intensify your BIM knowledge and insight into the industry. Also joining me as a panelist is Scott Scheipel, our Senior Manager of Customer Success, and we'd really love to hear from you. Scott will be fielding any questions following our webinar, so please use the Q&A tool for those questions, and we'll cover them all at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is part one of a three-part series designed to better enable those listening to understand benchmarks for model health and why it's an everyday necessity to have live data reports. Additionally, at the end of this presentation, it's my goal for you to understand which Revit warnings you should learn to triage and provide insight into tool sets you can use to be more proactive than reactive. Now, if you're like I was, say, maybe 5 years ago, I would only be concerned with a model if it just stopped performing right, meaning it was slow, and sometimes it'd only be slow when opening or printing or maybe saving. And we generally tend to only look at the health of our models when we see our models suffering. All of us here, myself included, have probably even seen errors when opening a file, or noticing views or model elements disappearing and we don't know why. And of course, we've experienced how devastating a model crash can be. If a file is small and there's only one or two people working in it, sometimes we tend to recover the model pretty quickly and we move forward. But other times when there's several or even many users in a model crash can easily have the effect of losing a minimum of 20 hours. Do some quick math and you're equating that to $1,500 or more in billable time. And with that in mind as well, can you really afford to not be proactive about your model health? There's also maybe generally quieter concerns to account for. Maybe your users just don't like to make a fuss, so you wouldn't know if there's a problem in the model until it reaches a critical point. Because we just tend to not have enough time, we always see model health as a secondary concern next to our deadlines, and we need to change that thinking. With some insights into your model health, you can essentially filter your organization's project so you only focus on those concerns that are going to cause a problem. Now, how do you tend to go about diagnosing a slow model? Taking a step back, how do you really go about becoming aware of a model concern? Do you notice it yourself as a designer, or are you on the IT side and you received a support ticket to investigate? When diagnosing a slow model, the first question that must be answered, or maybe set of questions really, is it user-based? Is it your entire model, maybe project, or God forbid, is it across all your models? If you do determine it's user-based, that can lead us to it being maybe a user-specific problem, such as a bad network connection or incomplete hardware or software updates. Also, maybe it's just a user-based bad practice of them having too many work sets open or not syncing on a regular basis or more. Model-based errors can often be also more critical as it has its own set of concerns because it's affecting the productivity of an entire team. Maybe you have too many links, too many work sets, or too many warnings. Now, we've all been there too, the Friday before a big deadline and the model crashes. Once you go through the process of recovering your file, what do you do? Do you just cross your fingers and hope whatever happened doesn't happen again? I know time tends to always be critical, but do you have a tool in place to figure out what went wrong? A crashing Revit model absolutely equates to money lost, so you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're not following up. Determining, of course, what's causing a slow model or a model crash is like figuring out an illness. It takes time and involves running tests. Perhaps you're using an add-in already. There's even a few free ones out there. I've also built Dynamo scripts in the past to help me out. However, many of these methods generally involve the diagnostic within the model being run, or it's on a scheduled basis, maybe overnight. So when a model crashes, oftentimes this data can be too old to be useful on determining what went wrong. So your best option is to review live data. With Unify's Project Analytics, this data is as live as the last sync in the model. And what I like most is that I can easily review all of my Revit projects at my organization at a glance. I can see how many projects are being evaluated here and how many unique models I'm evaluating. I can also review how many syncs are occurring from any time frame I'd like. Project analytics settings tend to default over the last week, as model health is something you should review at a minimum as often as that, but I can easily advocate on a daily basis or extend it to all time, and maybe you can see certain trends occurring. I've got some higher spikes here also that show sync time surpassing 3 minutes. And clicking on one of these particular syncs, I can go straight to the model to see which user experienced this, what the user sync history is, file size, sync times by other team members, and other additional insights into the model within just moments. And by identifying what critical health indicators are important to me, I can start to categorize my health data, making it easy to expand out my Revit warnings and evaluate the 11 projects triggering this particular alert. Another trigger I tend to like to focus on are which projects have CAD imports. Back in my BIM manager days, nothing tended to irk me more than CAD imports. Now with project analytics, I'm also given the ability to get insight into users and models throughout my organization in about the same time it would take me to open one model. Identifying which warnings you'd like to focus on is easy. Warnings are set on the company level. I've been hard pressed also kind of to find a definite list from Autodesk on what warnings are important and what aren't, so I'll just tend to share my advice. Some of the warnings I've categorized as critical are multiple rooms in the same region, could not create wall sweep, rectangular opening can't cut its host, identical instance in the same place, etc. Basically, the warnings I've just mentioned are ones that are going to designate as critical because it's affecting how my geometry appears in my model or how my schedules are reporting data. There's also, of course, non-critical warnings to account for, aka I shouldn't really have them in there, but I just don't have time to focus on them right now. So these types of warnings are ones that are like multiple rooms in the same enclosed region. Area or room separation line is slightly off axis. Wall room separation lines overlap. Basically, it's making Revit think too hard. So they don't affect my geometry, they don't affect my schedules, but I've definitely seen that when I get more than 100 or 200 of them, they do significantly slow my model down. And that's always bad. But don't worry, guys, I don't always evaluate every warning. I do ignore some. So just to kind of maybe touch on those, ones I tend to ignore are highlighted lines overlap or panels in a curtain system being slightly malformed. So basically ones that don't make Revit think, nor do they affect my geometry. While our company landing page gives you some immediate insight into what errors are occurring throughout your organization's set standards, you're also a click away from taking a deeper dive into a specific project's dashboard like you see here. I can easily see categories of warnings and the specific number that exists. We also provide an overall model health score that doesn't just take the warnings we just mentioned into account, but I can also see other types of data like CAD links, imports, model sync time, save time, and more. And also this particular model health score is actually my aggregate model health score because I'm a firm here where I'm in charge of multiple aspects of the design. So I have multiple models being reviewed under the same project. Now, sync times and file size are also at your fingertips. The top image here shows sync history of an entire project, while my bottom image shows sync time for a specific model. Like everything else too, the date range is adjustable, and I can hover over any data point to see exact dates and times of the sync. Setting our health thresholds also per project is straightforward, and I can even copy it from other projects set up in Project Analytics. And while I'm not a fan of having any warnings in a project, we need to be realistic. Non-critical Revit warnings are set here to only start affecting my model health score when I have 100 of them. And my model health score will be more severely impacted when I cross 200. Now, each setting too can also be unique per project as it's fully customizable, but some clients have opted for things like shell projects based upon square footage, or they take particular studios or offices into account. This helps all sorts of different BIM managers actually better identify project teams that may be struggling quietly. So I've discussed a few of the numerous questions here that must be answered when diagnosing slow or crashing models. I've also given you a bit of insight into seeing live data to triage those particular projects. While using project analytics as a filter through your organization, you can have a significant time savings in diagnosing slow or crash or possibly soon to be crashing Revit model. Reviewing these important metrics of model health, such as warnings, as well as Revit minor versions and family content across your entire organization It saves heaps of time, and we can now easily review all of that data in one platform. So thank you, everyone. I hope you found today's presentation insightful. Before I turn it over to Scott Scheipel for any questions, continue to mark your calendars for the second Wednesday of the month. And next month, we will cover part 2, where I'll show you how to set up your projects in Project Analytics. And of course, if you can't wait to learn more, reach out to us at unifylabs.com/contact, or you can reach out to sales@unifylabs.com. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Scheipel to assist with our Q&A.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen. Looks like we do have a few questions that came through. The first being, how are models connected to Project Analytics?
So the models are connected through Project Analytics through the Unify app. Your models will continue to be stored whether on BIM 360, Revit server, or network location. So once that file is connected to Unify, it's simply a matter of just pretty much saving it. So we're just gathering the sync data, and that is what's being transferred.
Great. Number 2, can Project Analytics purge my model or fix errors for me?
No, it can't. Like I was touching on earlier, we're only gathering the sync data, so you'll still be responsible for any of the cleanup associated with the models.
Great. And last but not least, are there plans to add additional health indicators in the near future?
Absolutely. We have a great platform called Receptive where a bunch of our customers submit their ideas. That determines our roadmap for any features moving forward. So we have a ton of features planned and coming up, but definitely put in all of your suggestions and even upvote those submitted by other customers. You'd be able to get some great insights.
Great. Well, everyone, thanks for joining. As Karen mentioned, we'll talk to everyone again during our next session on March 11th at 11 Pacific Time, 1 Central Time, which will focus again on Project Analytics with a focus on setting up your Insight models. Everyone have a great rest of the day, and we'll chat soon. Thanks.